We are just under 24 hours away from Hurricane Idalia making landfall in the United States. Everything you need to know, including what the media won't tell you, will be coming up. Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate, and welcome back to another weather forecast discussion, this time for August 29th, 2023. Now, we're going to be focusing on Idalia here, Hurricane Idalia. It is expected to be a major upon landfall. This video is going to be split up into two parts. We're going to be talking about the official information that's been given by the governmental officials, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of Idalia towards the end. But I wanted to give you guys the big picture here to show you that Franklin is continuing its trajectory as we've been talking about for the past few days. Rip currents are still going to be a major threat up and down the United States coastline, specifically the East Coast. And then, of course, the island of Bermuda is going to have to watch out. You can also see that the eye is a lot larger now, meaning that this hurricane has started to weaken. And it actually was a 150 mile per hour storm yesterday. Right now, it is a 125 mile per hour storm with a pressure of 947 millibars. But enough of Franklin. Let's move on to Idalia. Idalia, as of the 2 p.m. advisory here, is a 90 mile per hour Category 1 hurricane with a minimum pressure of 974 millibars. You can see here on the cone of uncertainty, this is the best track to where Idalia could make landfall. But just to keep in mind that just because the eye is passing somewhere in this cone doesn't mean that areas outside of the cone is not going to see impacts. And specifically on the eastern side of where Idalia is going to be, that's where the main activity is going to be, specifically because of the storm surge, the tornado threats, and of course, the flooding. So something to keep in mind with that. Of course, hurricane warnings have been issued up and down the Big Bend from Apalachicola down into the Tampa area. And then, of course, tropical storm warnings have been issued from Cape Canaveral all the way up towards the general vicinity of Wilmington, North Carolina, because this thing is expected to ride up the coast as a tropical storm from Wednesday into Thursday and then go out to sea towards Bermuda. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that landfall is anticipated sometime around Wednesday morning. So we will be live covering that as this continues to move on through. Just want to mention that these are some of the counties here that have evacuation orders, maybe not for the entire county per se, but evacuation orders are in place. So if you see your county here, we're talking from Gulf County all the way up through Franklin, Wakulla, Taylor, Dixie, Levy, Citrus, Hernando, Pasco, and Pinellas County. You guys are going to want to watch, and even further inland, if there are any sort of evacuation orders that fit your criteria, you guys need to get out. You guys need to be able to move further inland. All right. I know some people may not have the money to do it. Trust me, even if you just go further inland, it'll be so much better than staying near those areas where the evacuation order is being placed. And one of the main reasons why evacuation orders have been issued is because of the storm surge. And I told you guys the storm surge numbers are going to go up. They are. And we're anticipating 10 to 15 feet of storm surge here, where Idalia is anticipated to make landfall. From the Osceola River area all the way over down to Yankeetown, this is going to be a big hot zone. And keep in mind, if this track veers off to the west just a little bit, then of course we can continue to expect higher amounts of storm surge in some of the areas that are further west. So realistically speaking, if you're along the coastline, it's just not a great idea for you to be out there, all right? And even down here into Tampa Bay, we're anticipating about 4 to 7 feet of storm surge that is possible here across the area. To put it into perspective as to what the storm surge could be like over in Tampa, here is a nice little graphic that shows you exactly that. There's Amalie Arena for those of you who are wondering where exactly in Tampa we are. And you can see all these yellows are where 6 feet of storm surge could occur. And then all these blues are where the 3 feet of storm surge could occur. So a lot of these areas could potentially be underwater in some spots. And realistically speaking, if you are down towards the ground, if you're driving through all this, you really shouldn't. Another thing to put into perspective is Cedar Key is in some of the areas here that is anticipated to get major amount of storm surge. This was from Evan Fisher, and they mentioned that there was going to be some significant storm surge over there. Look at this video that is anticipated and forecasted before and after of Cedar Key. And that's a lot of water, all right? That's the before. This is the after. And when we stress that there's going to be a significant amount of storm surge in some of these areas, we want to stress that you still have time to go ahead and get out now. But time is running out, all right? You do not want to be surrounded by water. You do not want to be underwater. that is not survivable. So let's take a look at the interactive graphic on where the heaviest amount of storm surge can be. And my goodness, you can see a lot of red, Now, keep in mind, the colors are as follows. If you are in the yellow, that is 3 feet of storm surge. If you're in the orange, that is 6 feet of storm surge or greater. And if you're in the red, that's 9 feet of storm surge and above. And that 9 feet of storm surge gets up to that second story. And if you're on stilts on any sort of building, I'm sorry, but that's not going to help you from any of the storm surge that could come through. So we can start as far north as areas over here in Taylor County. You can see areas south of Perry along the waterway. Fortunately, there's not a whole lot of people that live in those areas, so that's kind of the good news. We get down towards Steinhatchee. Steinhatchee is going to see a lot of storm surge. And if you're over there, you guys need to evacuate now. If you're in Horseshoe Beach, I mean, you can see everywhere is just covered in red. You need to evacuate now. Swanee, you need to evacuate now. Everything's covered in red. Areas all the way over to Cedar Key. We just mentioned how there was going to be a significant amount of storm surge over there. You need to get out now. All right. The whole purpose is this entire area all the way down towards Homosassa Springs, all this down here along the coastline. There's going to be some significant amount of storm surge, so you need to get out now. Moving down towards the Clearwater, the St. Petersburg, and the Tampa area, you can see not as much storm surge, but there will be storm surge, especially if you're on the outer portions on the barrier islands. Clearwater is probably going to see a significant amount of storm surge. All the way down over here towards the St. Pete Beach areas, you're going to see a lot of storm surge. Areas in the Tampa Bay area, all right? Tampa is not excluded from this. We're expected to see a good amount of storm surge, probably about 3 to 6 feet of storm surge in some of these areas. So definitely something to keep in mind as this continues to move on through. Fortunately, once you head down towards Fort Myers, it's not expected to be a whole lot of storm surge, maybe a little bit of aerial flooding within some of these areas. So let's get into some of the graphics here. You can take a look and see that this is the total rainfall forecast over the next 3 days. And it's an abundance of water. A lot of it is going to be mainly centralized on the northern and the northwestern side of Idalia. So wherever Idalia makes landfall is where the majority of rain is going to come. But you can still see that anywhere that Idalia tracks over, it's going to create an abundance of rainfall. And because of that, the threat for flash flooding is indeed the case. We have a moderate risk for flash flooding here in this red. And then, of course, this even extends even outwards into portions of the Appalachians. So realistically, if you're in any of these areas of the yellow or in the red, you are going to want to be in a not flood-prone area. I prefer that if you guys see floodwaters, you turn around, don't drown, don't drive in flooded roadways. I also want to highlight the tornado risk. You can see here's the day 1 tornado outlook, which will be in effect all the way up until early tomorrow morning. You can see that 5% chance for tornadoes exists down there. And then for tomorrow on Wednesday, you can clearly see that that tornado risk expands because Idalia moves on through. Don't be surprised if they upgrade this. If this gets to a 10% risk, that definitely could be something to watch out for because of a lot of the storms that are going to be surging inland off of Idalia. So what does that mean for me? Well, the video's not over, but coverage will not cease either once it is. And we will have a live stream up here tonight at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. There's going to be a new aircraft reconnaissance plane that's going to be launching sometime around 8. And so we'll be able to get you guys new information based off of what they see, as well as any sort of external impacts that could be provided. We also will have a second live stream for Idalia's landfall starting at 4 a.m. tomorrow. And then, of course, after that live stream, I'll be able to take a little bit of a break before in the afternoon, sometime in the late afternoon, we will be live again because of that tornado risk that'll continue to expand all the way over into the Carolinas. So, shall we get into the nitty-gritty? I think we shall. And the big thing here that I'm seeing from Idalia is it's intensifying. It's gonna need one more extra step for it to be rapidly intensifying, but it's obviously got the warm waters. We've been talking about that, and everyone kind of already knows the waters are above average. The shear is limited a little bit. It's still got a little bit of dry air. You can see contrast to the eastern side. The western side of the storm doesn't really have as many bright colors that's going on. But the main thing here that I want to highlight is that you see a lot of these white and black clouds that are starting to pop up from the center. This is some intense convection that's really starting to build up in the center of Idalia. But what it needs is it needs another band of convection to start to form on the opposite side. And once it starts to do that, and they both start to rotate around the center, that is when it will officially be at its peak of rapid intensification as it moves along the coastline of Florida. Now, I want to highlight two things. First off, there is Idalia once again, but you see all this black coloring right here? This is all the dry air that is present that is limiting a lot of the thunderstorm activity to that eastern side. Don't really have a whole lot of thunderstorms on that western side. And I also want to mention that there's a little bit of shear. You can see these clouds that are moving off from left to right. So we have a little bit of westerly shear that is pushing across. And when this Idalia storm tries to wrap a lot of that rain around, that wind shear kind of holds it in place on that northern side or that northwestern side, which is the reason why there's a lot of rain that's going to be centralized over those areas. And reconnaissance found exactly that. Idalia is still a little bit lopsided. A lot of the main activity is on that eastern side, but you can see there is where the center of low pressure system was located with the hurricane hunters here. And you can see a lot of these pink winds, which indicated hurricane force winds at flight level. And that's on the eastern side. On the western side, there's not really a whole lot of activity over here. So it needs to start to balance out, needs to start to become uniform. But this is where we really get into things right here. The aircraft reconnaissance for NOAA has a radar on board the plane, and it actually records what it sees as it flies through. So on the left, we have reflectivity or rain. On the right, we have winds or velocities. And you can see that right here, the yellows aren't completely surrounding the center. It has a little bit of an eye, but it is mainly stacked on this southern, eastern, and potentially even northern side. If it can wrap that all the way around on the western side, it will begin to rapidly intensify, which is what that second tower, the convective tower that I was talking about earlier, will do. It will close off the side. It will allow the eye to be fully encircled by the strong enough eye wall. It'll be able to rapidly intensify. You can also see that on the winds right here. You can see we have a lot of hurricane force winds on the eastern side, but if you look on that northwestern side, it hasn't really wrapped around fully. And this is further emphasized by the difference of the winds at flight level, which is on the right, and at the surface, which is right here. And you can see we have a lot of winds aloft, and then we also have a lot of winds at the surface too. Very strong winds at the surface, but that western side hasn't been cut off quite yet. So we have hurricane force winds within this thing, obviously. Can it fully encircle the eye to allow it to continue to rapidly intensify? That is the big question. Now, unfortunately, it does seem like our answer is going to be yes, it will. It'll probably occur overnight, because overnight, that is usually when the maximum amount of thunderstorm activity for tropical systems occur. That is called Dmax. And of course, Dmax will allow this thing to rapidly intensify into a major hurricane. All right, so let's see what the models are saying about some wind gusts within some of these areas. Now, keep in mind, wind gusts are not sustained winds, so it's just winds that are surging and kind of gusting up. It appears at random almost. And so you can see that as this moves on through, at the top part of your screen, you can see the time as it moves about. It's about 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We got some almost tropical storm force wind gusts that are over here near the Tampa and Sarasota areas. Overnight is when stuff is really going to start to uptick. Once we get past midnight, that's when things are going to start to deteriorate more and more. A lot of strong wind gusts over here along Tampa and Sarasota. Still weak tropical storm force winds, but a lot of these winds are going to be pushing that water inland. It's going to continue to bring a lot of those thunderstorms inland, and so therefore we're going to continue to see a lot more impacts on that eastern side. But as we continue from 5 a.m., 8 a.m., and then up to 11 a.m., you can see some of the wind gusts really start to become significant. I'm seeing some valleys and upwards of about hurricane force here on the coastline, which is the reason why you really shouldn't be on the coastline when these storms move on through. A couple storm chasers are thinking about doing it. I advise them not to, because it's just not survivable. So here's some of the maximum wind gusts here from a 6-hour period. So this would be from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. You can see along the coastline here of Clearwater, you can see almost high-end tropical storm force winds, about 60 to 65 miles per hour. Once you get further north, that's where you start to touch into the hurricane aspect. And once you get over here towards the Tallahassee area, you guys could potentially see some wind gusts in upwards of 66 miles per hour, and then areas even further east could potentially see in upwards of 90 miles per hour. All right. So that's one of those things to where you guys are going to want to make sure that you're further inland. Once you're closer towards that coastline, I mean, those wind gusts are going to be pretty high up. So the further inland you go, of course, the less it gets. If you're also in, say, a mobile home, those things won't really stand to wind gusts like this. So you need to make sure that if you are in a mobile home, you need to get further inland. You need to get away, per se, from the track of Idalia. And of course, I want to highlight the reflectivity, or the potential simulated radar, as this moves on through. You can see, according to the HAFS-A model, this thing is expected to rapidly intensify, of course, but you can see sometime around midnight to a little bit after midnight is when a lot of these storms are going to start to make its way inland. And these types of little popcorn storms are the ones that could potentially produce your water spouts. Once they make landfall, of course, they turn into tornadoes. So definitely something for you to watch. The HAFS model, once again, continues to show that it is going to make landfall sometime around 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. So if you are over here in these areas, you're going to want to watch out. But I also want to show you what the model says. Look at how the model says a lot of the rain is on that northern side and that northwestern side. Nothing's really anything further than this giant blob. And this giant blob is going to be where the majority of that rainfall is going to come. So if you guys are even further on that western side, that's a little bit more of an aerial flood risk for the rain. If you're on the eastern side, especially on the shoreline, that is going to be your storm surge and your tornado risk. So something to kind of note, depending upon where it makes landfall, is where we can determine the specific impacts. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Once again, I will be live here tonight, so make sure to turn on notifications. But if you did enjoy the video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button down below. It helps us spread awareness to as many people as possible. Share this video with as many people as possible as well, as we got to get the word out. There is still time for people to evacuate, but we're running out. And so if we can get this out to more and more people, especially in a short period of time, that would be great. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you guys tonight. Stay safe, everyone, and peace out.